Okay, let's dive into this harrowing story. It's about a simple business trip that just completely spiraled into an absolute nightmare. And it's a first-hand look at how, in a really volatile place, even the best intentions can lead to total disaster.
Can you even imagine hearing those words? Especially from the very man you hired to protect you. Well, for two entrepreneurs in rural Liberia, this was the terrifying start of an ordeal that pushed them right to the brink. We're going to deconstruct just how a simple plan went so horribly, horribly wrong.
All right, so where does this all begin? Not with a crime, believe it or not, but with a plan full of hope. Two business partners, Ron Keast and Ian Yap, they traveled to the small Liberian town called Kahnplay with a pretty straightforward vision.
I mean, just look at how optimistic this whole thing was. Their plan was entirely positive. They wanted to revive a family coffee farm, figure out if it was a good business, and, this is the big one, bring jobs to local young people. They even planned on making a friendly courtesy call to the local commissioner. Everything seemed completely above board.
So that was the plan. But then, boom, everything changed. And it wasn't because of something they did, but because of a single conversation. A conversation where every single word carried two dangerously different meanings, all depending on who was listening.
On the surface, the meeting seemed totally innocent. They were just talking with Chief Wodo, a guy Ian had actually known since he was a kid. But here's the crucial bit of context they completely missed. Chief Wodo had just been kicked out of power by the new military government. So to their soldier guide, John Krapon, just speaking to this guy was a politically charged, threatening act. They had no idea the danger they were in.
And this is where it all goes off the rails. How in the world did a simple discussion about farming become a blueprint for an invasion? Well, it was a perfect storm, really. You had the paranoia of a poorly trained soldier, you had language barriers, and you had the raw political tension of a country that had just gone through a coup.
And this is where you can really see the catastrophic gap in understanding. To their soldier, John Krapon, all their business talk sounded exactly like a war plan. Recruit boys to clear brush? Nope, he heard hide soldiers in the bush. Bring equipment, like air conditioners, he heard aircraft with guns. Even something as innocent as jute bags was somehow twisted into grenades and guns. A simple business plan had become, in his mind, the blueprint for a full-on mercenary invasion.
So once that misunderstanding was locked in the soldier's mind as fact, the situation just completely collapsed. Their arrest turned into this systematic process of dehumanization, something designed to break them down completely.
Now you might think this was just random cruelty, but it wasn't. It was a calculated procedure. Taking their shirts and shoes, that was for humiliation, and to make it harder to escape. Taking their passports and valuables, that was to erase their identities, to make them nameless. And finally, throwing them into a dark dungeon was all about complete sensory deprivation. They weren't businessmen anymore. They were prisoners.
And when we say dungeon, don't picture a cell with bars. No. This was literally a black hole in the ground. An 8-by-8-foot pit so dark you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. It was designed to shatter your spirit through absolute filth and by taking away all your senses.
And get this, even the torture itself had this bizarre, twisted logic behind it. When they were brought out to be whipped, Ian's advice was to scream his head off. See, he understood that staying quiet would be seen as defiance, as the devil inside refusing to come out. This led to this grim, surreal scene of them just screaming and flailing, all to convince their captors that the devil was finally being expelled.
Okay, so their ordeal is about to shift gears. They're moving from the raw, physical torture of the dungeon to, well, to the machinery of so-called justice. And what happened next revealed two completely different systems. One a total farce, and the other a surprising little glimmer of hope.
The charges they came up with, they were just beyond absurd. Ron's passport was Ghanaian, not Jamaican, and the CIA, they were widely believed to have actually backed the very coup these soldiers were now defending. And Ian, a guy just trying to get his mom's farm running again, was charged with treason. It was insane.
And if you need any proof that this trial was a complete sham, just listen to this. After they wrote down their statements, the papers were passed down the line of the 7 tribunal members. Each one pretended to read it, some of them even held it upside down, before passing it to the next guy. Since not a single one of them could actually read, they ended up ordering the prisoners to read their own testimonies out loud. You can't make this stuff up.
But right when things looked their darkest, a single act of incredible bravery changed everything. A local woman, a complete stranger, felt that the soldiers had brought shame on her town, so she took this immense risk. She smuggled a note on a tiny scrap of paper out of the prison. And that one little note got to the right people in Monrovia and triggered the intervention that would end up saving their lives.
So this table really just lays it all out, the stark contrast between these two trials. On one hand, you have the military tribunal, run by illiterate soldiers, a total farce that ended in a death sentence. But then you have the civilian trial, overseen by the district commissioner, which had actual cross-examination and resulted in a minor suspended sentence. The difference between these two systems was, quite literally, life and death.
So after they release and a truly harrowing escape, the narrator starts to grapple with this much deeper, much more complex question. Who or what was really responsible for the evil they went through? And the answer, as you'll see, is far from simple.
So you gotta start with the individual, right? Was John Calhoun, the soldier who arrested them, just evil? Or was he a product of his circumstances? I mean, think about it. An impoverished young man, steeped in paranoia, given a gun and authority, but with absolutely no training to tell the difference between a couple of enthusiastic entrepreneurs and an enemy of the state.
Or do we need to zoom out? Maybe the blame lies with the system itself. Was the real culprit a fragile government that couldn't secure its own country or properly train its own soldiers? That kind of failure created an environment where paranoid injustice was almost guaranteed to happen.
And maybe we need to zoom out even further than that. What about the role of foreign corporations in all this? You had these mining companies nearby that created these little bubbles of European-style wealth, but they did next to nothing to help with the stark poverty just outside their fences. That kind of massive economic gap bred the very conditions that created soldiers just like John Clapham.
Or ultimately, was this whole nightmare just the inevitable result of really deep historical roots? You're talking about over 130 years of social and political failure that created these huge divides between the ruling class and the indigenous people. That failure to build a real cohesive society allowed this kind of brutality to just fester.
So what are we supposed to take away from all this? Well, it's a powerful reminder of how personal, political, and historical forces can all just collide in a perfect storm. It shows you how fragile justice can be, but also how individual courage, like that of the village woman who risked everything, can still shine through in the absolute darkest of moments.
And, their ordeal didn't just magically end with the verdict. Oh no. It ended with a frantic, high-speed car chase, escaping soldiers who were still pursuing them even after they had been officially released. The trauma was so deep, so profound, that neither man could bring himself to speak about what happened for the next 35 years.
And that's really the question this whole incident leaves us grappling with. Is evil found in the malicious act of a single person, or is evil really in the environment, the poverty, the paranoia, the systemic failure that makes that act not just possible, but maybe even inevitable?